Welcome, everybody, to Friedman Adventures and a very special Danny Cadota show. Without further ado, take it away, Danny.
Hey, Phil, we have a special thing, and we're just so blessed to have. I got my fishing partner, Jeff Sakuda, here, and we've been fishing together since college, our early college days. But his uncle, Kiyomi, has a story to tell. And you, of all people, who did a lot of the narration for Corey on Manzanar, he lived it. He was one of the guys that went out fishing under the camp. So you know what? This is so precious because we get to preserve this. He's going to talk to us about how they snuck out under the barbed wire to go trout fish. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate. So, Kilman, why don't you go ahead and tell us about you can give background or whatever however you want to preface it.
Well, let me tell you what one of the stories my dad told me. When we used to go up to Mammoth, always there was a stop on the way. It was Manzanar, right? And those are the days you could just drive in, park your car right next to the memorial. And now it's a little different, but anyway. So my dad said, I asked him, how did you sneak out and stuff like that? So he was telling me kind of some of the stories, but it was interesting. He was about 11 or 12 maybe, and he had a couple of kids with him that were like maybe 8 or 9, and so they looked up to my dad, Fred, right? So anyway, they snuck out at night and they fished in the morning, and they were coming back down the river towards the camp, and the two young kids go, "Hey, Fred, there's a white guy fishing. And he saw us and he's coming up. What are we going to do?" And my dad said, "Well, I guess we just keep fishing. He already saw us, right? So we'll just pretend like nothing's going on." So they finally meet up with this guy, and he looks at them, and they're all nervous, right? So he says, "How's the fishing?" And they said, "Oh, we got a few fish." And a minute later, he goes, "Say, what tribe are you guys from?" Because they were so dark, from seeing in the sun. He thought they were just local Indians.
I vaguely remember that. I must have been there.
You know what? That must have been something with us. Because when I was a little kid, I used to go swimming all the time. So I was really dark. I had a tan, and I was very close to my grandparents. I fished with them every weekend. But they took me to the Grand Canyon once, right? And people were handing me money. And my grandparents are going, "What the heck is that?" Same thing. They thought I was an Indian. And they're handing me money. I said, "And you know what? Had I known that, I would have gone back there during my college days. Instead of going to work, I could have just sat there with a can,
So anyway, my dad knew, I guess there was a Paiute tribe was up there. So he just said, "Oh, we're Paiutes." And they just continued on fishing. He said, "Have a nice day, fellas." Awesome. They thought for sure the guy was going to bust them and, call the camp and get the military down there and haul them away. But they were just 3 kids fishing, and he just thought they were just Indian kids.
Awesome.
But anyway, Kilme actually, he's told me stories about how he used to sneak out. This was right at the beginning of camp. So things were a little more tense back then, right? Wasn't it kind of that way at the beginning of when you were first interned?
But what happened before that is when the war broke out, and I didn't completely understand what the situation was with respect to the Japanese ancestors. And when we were told that we're going to have to get rid of all of our family furniture and everything, and we're going to what they termed war relocation center. Another word is a concentration camp. And I was sad then because I had a dog named Leo that I loved so much. And then my family finally was able to muster enough money to buy me a bicycle. But when the war broke out and we had to discard everything we had, the only thing we could have was what we could put in a suitcase. So my dog was gone and my bicycle was gone. And that was one of the saddest moments that I ever experienced.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
When you're
of
9
course.
years old,
Those
you
are
know,
priorities.
those
Because
are
that
the
bicycle
first-
meant the world to me.
Yeah.
And then soon after, they came after us in a big truck and took us to the Union Station with what little we had. And then back in those days, there was actually a train running from the Union Station to Lone Pine, California. And then in Lone Pine, we unloaded whatever we had and climbed onto a truck for the 15-minute drive to what was Manzanar. And the whole thing was done so hastily that the structures that we were to live in wasn't actually finished. In other words, initially, what they did, they built this, the barracks with number 3 grade lumber, so they had knot holes in it. And so on a cold night, the wind would come through the knot holes on the walls and on the floor. And then it wasn't until maybe 6 months later that they finally put tar paper in to seal off the weather. And then finally things got together. The mess halls was completed, and actually it turns out that as a child, 13 years old, actually enjoyed being in Manzanar.
Really?
Because back in 1930s, our family didn't have any money, so the place where we were living in to begin with wasn't that much better than the facility in camp. And so as a youngster, I actually enjoyed, and it was a learning experience because I never knew there was such a thing as a creek. And even more, I didn't know there were fish could be found in the creeks. And then we started fishing. And
You weren't supposed to be doing that, were you?
no,
Yeah.
that's another story.
That's the best part. That's the best part.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
but we got grocery wrapping string and bent needle, and we found worms along the stream beds, and we actually caught fish. And I didn't know there were fish in. There were other people that knew of trout, but this whole thing was a new experience for me, and that was very enlightening experience to learn that there are streams and rivers. And living in Los Angeles, we were confined to our homes, and not having an automobile or anything. It's just like the way things are with me now. I don't have a car anymore, so I'm locked in my home. Thankfully, I have people like Jeff and.
Wow.
So when your first time you guys thought about going fishing, how did you? What was your mindset on that? You probably got together with your buddies and said, "Hey,
What?
let's sneak out and go fishing."
It was a word of mouth that somebody else from another part of the facility told about fishing. And then, so do you remember Akio Itamura?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Akio,
He learned of it from his dad. And then it went down the line, and finally I went. That's how I learned about fishing, from Akio's dad.
So, what was the deal with the guards? Were they turning a blind eye to the whole thing?
Actually, on the on the southwest corner of Manzanar, Bears Creek ran through that corner of the camp. And so you were inside the barbed wire.
Oh.
But there was a stretch of the stream, maybe a couple hundred yards, cut through the corner of the camp, and that's where we fished. And then it's after that experience that we decided, well, there must be other nice places beyond the fence. So we would crawl under the lowest string of the barbed wire, and that's when we were fired on by the guards up in the tower.
They actually shot at you?
And I'm the one that was closest to where the I didn't actually hear the shot, but about 4 feet in front of me, the desert sand exploded.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was strange because I didn't hear the shot, but the desert sand they were yelling at us to get back behind the barbed wire fence, and we assumed that the other people did hear the shots. I guess it was Akio
Yeah, maybe.
and your dad probably.
Yeah.
So the guards shoot at you. That begs the question, after they shot at you, did you try to go fishing and go under the barbed wire again?
It turns out that the restrictions eased back, such that they didn't even bother to close the barbed wire fencing. They left it open, and people would wander in and out. And soon after that, they actually gave individual families that wanted to leave Manzanar back to their home in Los Angeles or wherever, and they paid, from my understanding, they paid family $25 to leave the facility.
But they had to come back? Did they have to come back?
No,
This was later on then, right?
They were free to leave the camp.
Ah, okay.
So were the guards just or unjust? Were they mean? How would you characterize their behavior?
Initially, we didn't know what's going on, and even the guards didn't know what to do. And the guards were up on the tower.
Yeah.
But I still vividly remember seeing the guards up there trolling back and forth along the walkway with a rifle in their hand.
After Pearl Harbor was attacked, did you feel, was it obvious there was an anti-Japanese sentiment in the public at large?
Only in the sense, because I still didn't understand, have a clear understanding of what was going on. But I remember going to stores, and back in those days, there were no Costco or Walmart. It's little mom and pop stores that it was the way of life down on Broadway, and I would see signs on the window, no Japs allowed.
Oh my God, that was such a horrible part of American history. I mean, let's get this straight. You were American citizens of Japanese descent, and you were ripped away from your homes and your families and put into these internment camps. And as a kid, I imagine that just didn't make any sense to you.
And to extend that thought, I always felt that being Japanese was an inferior part of my life.
Yeah.
And I always had the sense of being a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
Up until recently, that thought carried on for, even after I was drafted into the military during the Korean War. And I remember during the Korean War, the military people going from one facility to another, we didn't fly. You took a train to wherever. And I remember taking a train to New Orleans. And in New Orleans, I had to change trains because another operator took over from New Orleans to a place called Camp Gordon, Georgia. So while I'm waiting in the train station in New Orleans, we're talking 1950. So there was a waiting room for the whites and a waiting room for the blacks. And I was very confused because
You were neither.
I'm not white.
Where do I go?
And so I was waiting in the waiting room with the blacks. Then somebody came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, soldier, you're in the wrong waiting room." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "This is only for the blacks. You belong in the other side of the hallway." And it was for the white. And that's when I finally learned that I'm considered something more than second-class citizen.
Yeah.
You know, I think some of it, to some extent, and Jeff and I are the generation after that, but I mean, I looked at my dad's older brothers here. One served in the Pacific. He was in the MIS, right?
Oh.
So he flew over the Philippines with hollowed out B-24s filled with fuel so they could intercept Japanese messages, you know. And then 3 of my other uncles went over to Europe, and they were in the 442nd, you know. But I think a lot of that helped probably defer some of that animosity because, you know, as it turns out, you know, the most decorated unit in history, you know, right?
Yeah.
So when my dad served, like you, in the Korean War, and he did 2 tours. He was one of the first guys in the Air Force, and you know, he said, yeah, there was still some animosities, especially when they're down south. But you know, I know Jeff and I growing up, we saw a little bit, but you know, by that time, I had a bad, I had a bad attitude, and somebody tried to say something like that to me, it would pretty much put it back down his throat, physically, you know. And that's why, you know, football and judo was good because then you learn some humility there too, you know.
So the country, in this case, the United States of America, that took all your worldly possessions and put you in a concentration camp, that country, you go to war to fight for that country. Can you explain to us all how you were able to do that?
Well, I was in a concentration camp, and I left Manzanar in 1945, and I lived in Chicago for 6 months.
So I was born.
My mom's hometown.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Los Angeles because my mother was terminally ill, and a few months after that, I received a draft notice, and 12 months of 6 months of training, and I was in Korea, Wijambu, Korea, near the Imjin River. Few years ago, I was in a concentration camp because I was an enemy alien, and then a few years later, I'm fighting for the country that.
Oh my God, I can only imagine what kind of emotions were running through you. Were you still proud to be an American?
Well, it left me with a sense of inferiority complex that I had a difficult time getting over in the next 40 or 50 years. It's in relatively recent years that I feel better about myself, having worked in the aviation industry. I worked for Honeywell Corporation in the flight computer. And it's as recently as that is when I felt that I'm part of this country.
Oh my God. It's just mind-boggling to me how you could have felt inferior, but I do get it. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm not even 1/10 of the man that you are. and you overcame all of this adversity and became a productive, great citizen, and you still love the United States of America. I mean, you are a shining example of what people can be, an inspiration to me and to so many others. Wow. I feel like I'm in the presence of someone great, right,
Oh,
Danny?
absolutely. I mean, we were lucky. Our parents and their generation really made it a lot easier for all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
Jeff, when the time we were in college or even high school, I mean, it was already blazed. The trail was already blazed,
Yeah.
and it was up to us to take the ball and run with it at that point. But yeah, no, it was the greatest generation.
Yes.
It really was.
I'm really curious about how you feel about the United States. Do you still feel it's a great country?
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
After I retired from Honeywell in 1995, I decided I wanted to learn to play the piano. So I went out and bought a Yamaha piano, and it's still in my house.
Oh yeah. Senior,
And I didn't know one note from another, but I bought a book for the senior citizens beginning piano, and I went through 7 books for the older student, and I got myself to pick out a few melodies, and one of the melodies I love to play is "God Bless America."
Yeah.
That is
That says it
Man.
all, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that says how I feel about what transpired over my earlier years.
You are a remarkable man. Wow. I just feel like you are such an extraordinary human being. There's a lot of kids and other people, adults also, with this anti-American sentiment right now. Now, for me, I've traveled. I've lived in China for several years, Costa Rica for a year, Mexico for a couple of years. So I know what the world looks like, and I know how special the United States of America is. But a lot of people here really kind of have a hate for the country. Don't think it's a very good place. What do you think about that?
I have a difficult time understanding that.
Yeah, me too. Same here. It's not utopia, but it's a pretty damn good place. I know you feel that way, Danny.
Well, and out of respect for their generation, which is my parents' generation, he and my dad are the same age. My dad did 2 tours in Korea, and my uncles, 4 uncles, one went out to the Pacific and 3 fought in Europe. Out of respect for them too, we always give them a high regard, and that's always been a real endearing part of the respect that we owe. I felt that we owe them. They helped blaze our trail and made life much easier for us at that point. So, I've always very thankful for what you guys have done, and it made our lives a lot easier. That's for sure.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the internment camp. How was the food? Was the food any good? Was it nourishing? Was it terrible? How was it exactly?
The food was such that there were numerous times when we would go in and just get just rice, and put soy sauce on it, and that would be the dinner.
Oh, my God.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That must have been pretty bad.
Yeah, there's not a lot of protein there. Is there?
Yeah.
But that says
No.
that says
no,
something
that's right.
about the food.
Yeah. That says it all.
The area where the internment camps are, the weather can be rather harsh. Did that have an adverse effect on daily life?
You know where Owens Valley is?
Yes.
It's virtually covered with beach sand. And when the wind blows, you have sandstorms. And the way the buildings were structured, it was such that wind would come through the knot holes, and the windows were not precision windows, so the dust would come in. And every time there's a heavy dust storm, you would have to take we were issued military blankets. you would have to shake the
The
Oh,
sand.
the sand out.
And one of the things that you said you traveled to different countries.
Yes.
And to learn about their lifestyle, how they are. That's what I did because I was able to travel. I traveled to New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and even Europe. But my primary reason for traveling was not so much to see Mount Kilimanjaro or any other Mount Fuji. I traveled to learn about the other people's lifestyle.
Yep. Yeah,
And to learn about people in different countries so that I could measure where I stood in the world.
Exactly why I traveled. I remember when I was living in China, some of the foreign teachers would say, "Hey, let's go to this bar. There's a bunch of American guys down there. We can talk politics and sports and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, I can see Americans in America. I'm in China. I want to learn about the Chinese and hang out with them.
Agree with you. You know, when you visit other countries, even when I go to Mexico, we go to La Paz a lot. Danny's been with me down there. It's nice to hang out with the locals, and you know, there are nice resorts areas down there, but there's one landing down there where all the yachts come. I mean, we even seen Stephen Jobs' yacht there, you know. But if you walk in there, and you might as well be in Newport Beach here in California, because all the Mexicans there, they speak like we do. You know, their English is perfect. And I said, well, it's nice here, and I guess if I was a multimillionaire, I guess I could afford it. But I'd rather hang out with the local bars,
Oh,
and
yeah.
hang out with the
Oh,
local
yeah.
people,
Yep.
and they tell you the places they like to eat and stuff, and that's my gig. You know, I like you know, doing what the locals do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Kilme's right. I'm lucky because I got to travel all over the country and see how other people live. I've seen poor places. I've been to Vietnam. Been out in the country there, and people basically live in shacks, you know, lean-tos, but you know what? They're happy. You know, they don't know anything else. They don't know much about where I'm from, LA and California. But you know, it's funny though. You're out there, and they're living, like I said, literally in shacks. And then you look on top of their roof, and they got a satellite dish up there. So you know, they're still able to see what the rest of the world. But it's just kind of interesting, you know, to see. And I used to talk to the local people there. I said, you know, the Vietnam War, and they call it the American War, of course, was pretty messed up. Is there a feeling of resentment or hatred towards Americans? They said no, they don't. And in fact, they welcome Americans there. I thought that was interesting. You know, that I you know, visited a guy who was missing a leg because they stepped on a mine. You know? And he still has a good attitude.
Yeah.
So
That's a neat place.
you know, that's what I would say to kids now. You know, I said, you don't know what you have. You know, growing up here.
And in contrast to that, Vietnam situation, when I was in Korea, the people in Korea would do the laundry and whatever for the military personnel. And then one of them mentioned to me in broken English that if I'm Chinese or Korean, I told him I'm Japanese. He said Koreans don't like Japanese. It seems there was Japan invaded Korea
they were pretty
back.
tough.
I wasn't familiar with that. It must have happened before World War I. But they made it plain to me that they don't like Japanese, even in the American military uniform.
I get that because my dad, when he was in the Air Force, and when they took a hit, they were in a hot zone.
Oh,
So being Japanese American, exactly, it was not a popular deal. So he went down, and he said it bleeding like a stuck pig. But he went down with a Thompson, and he wasn't going to go alive because he would have got tortured, is what they were told him. So I mean, I could see how.
As a soldier in the Korean War, did you find your fellow soldiers had prejudice against you? Did they mistreat you because you were of Japanese ethnicity? How did that all go?
no, I found that to be just the opposite. As a matter of fact, I still remember in Korea, the people in my company learned that guy is from Los Angeles. So they would come to me and ask me about, hey, I heard you're from Los Angeles. Do you get to see Hollywood Boulevard? Hollywood Boulevard. It's the last place you want to be. But these other guys are from Wisconsin and Michigan, and they heard about Hollywood Boulevard and Beverly Hills, and they think it's the place to be. And one of the things that you asked was how people are, and to discover the nature of people in different countries. I remember two such situations. One happened in Christchurch, and another happened up in a place called Cairns. Cairns is in Australia, a neighborhood called, better known as the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah.
Well, being a tourist, of course, I had a sheet of paper, brightly colored, and I'm holding on to this sheet and reading the directions, and I'm looking around. And in Christchurch, somebody will come and say, sir, are you looking for someplace? If you're lost, I could help you. And they would take me to, and in Cairns, I'm holding on to one of those tourist brochures, and sure enough, somebody comes walking up to me, and sir, I could help you. And I mentioned to them that I'm staying at this hotel, but I left the hotel to sightsee on foot, and I couldn't locate my hotel. And so she was operating a store, a one-person store. She left that store and walked me all the way and said, sir, that's the hotel that you're staying. And I'll never forget that she left her store open. Of course, in Cairns you could do that. You wouldn't do that in Montebello.
That's so true. That's so true. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Jeff, do you remember any stories that your uncles told you about that were unique or anything else about Manzanar?
No, he didn't talk too much about it. But I remember him saying things like, well, they used to use tree limbs and stuff like that for fishing rods and stuff. But after a while, the lower limbs were all gone, and pretty soon they start. The ladies were complaining because the broomsticks started becoming missing.
I love it. Did you see any action in war, in the Korean War? Were you involved in any firefights? Or?
Yeah. In a place called Imjin River.
Because that was a very brutal war.
Yeah.
It was. And
were you there when the Chinese came across the border and pushed the American troops almost right out of there?
No, when I got there, it was nearing they were winding up the situation there. But I still vividly recall trucks, the military trucks, with bodies in it being carried away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I would tell my niece Lorraine that when you think of war, you think like this Western movie where a lot of people are just shooting at each other. When you're actually at the war that I experienced, it wasn't quite that way. It's not everybody is shooting at everybody else. It's not that way. It comes and goes. I think the streets of LA might be,
Arrival at Minson. Well,
yeah.
Oh my God, that's too much, huh,
But-
Danny?
yeah.
But one of the things everybody was so accustomed to experiencing is being bombed. And when you hear shells falling in the area, you just run right into the bunker. And that happened day and night. So you're going about doing your thing, but you have to make sure you have a bunker nearby.
Did you see any detrimental effects on your parents when they were in the internment camp? Good. I mean, most of the time, I can't remember my parents really suffering or going because they hide that from the kids. But this was so traumatic. Did you look at your father and mother and say, "Wow,
Well,
I feel sorry for them"? Or
It turns out that the year that we left Manzanar, my mother came down with cancer, terminal cancer, and so I didn't have a mother when I was drafted.
and your father, did he hold up well in the camps? Was he okay, or was he sad? Was he? Did you see a difference between your father?
My father was one that didn't express his feelings.
Yeah. Well, and that's very common for that era, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so. Even more so with the Japanese, I think.
Yes.
And actually, and I talked about it recently as last week with Lorraine, that my oldest sister is the one that actually brought me up after my mother passed away in 1945.
Did you guys get to eat the fish that you caught in Manzanar? Did you eat the fish? You get to eat the fish or not?
No, because actually we don't have a means to cook it.
Right, that's what I was thinking. The guards they wouldn't do it
Yeah.
for you, or yeah.
But it was a learning experience that there is such a thing as a creek or a stream, and then going a step further, that there's fish in the streams. And coming from Los Angeles, I didn't know there was such a thing as trout, and I even learned that some of the trout were rainbow trout, and the others were the German brown trout. And I learned to differentiate one from the other, and that's about my. Oh, but after we left camp, of course, now I know there is such a place as the High Sierras. So, and I can't remember if it was the college days or before. We did lots of backpacking and pack trips. We hired horses, Moss, and we hired a pack train. I think it's called a pack train, and we went deep into a neighborhood called the Bullfrog Lake and East Lake area in the Sierras backcountry.
Golden trout for Goldens?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it turns out that we weren't able to catch any.
Oh, okay.
I have pictures. I told you I had that.
Yeah.
My mom had that album. I have to find it because it's really interesting. Because you guys must have been 20, 21 back then.
Yeah, I guess.
And yeah, you had your backpacks on, and I even have pictures. When you're that age, right? I think it was Uncle Snyder had to go relieve himself. Of course, there's a picture of him with his bare butt, and those guys are all laughing.
Oh, of course. I mean, we would do that with our gang.
I said,
It's what we
When
do.
I saw those pictures, I thought, you know,
Yeah,
my dad and them, they're not much different than us.
Yeah,
they didn't know about backpacking. They tried to carry in canned food,
Okay.
and you know how heavy that is.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and serious backpackers carry in dehydrated food.
Yeah.
Right.
Just add water. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we were Boy
So
Scouts. yeah.
so they started up on the I think it was Independence Onion Valley
Yeah.
out of Independence, and they tried to carry the canned food, you know, Campbell soup and whatever, and they couldn't carry it any longer, so they dumped everything.
It's heavy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Did you become a fisherman later in life? Did you pursue fishing as a hobby? Mm-hmm. You did? Mm-hmm. So you fished when you were 30, 40, 50, 60? Mm-hmm.
So I've been to a number of backcountry fishing along the John Muir Trail, and in later years, Crawley Lake and the Mammoth area. So I actually bought a condominium in Mammoth Lakes, a few blocks from where Kenny has a condominium.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. We still have that, the timberline up there, but.
And remember, mine was called Timber Ridge.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Timber Ridge 28.
So Danny and Jeff, for you guys, I mean, you're part of the Japanese culture, and you hear this story, and I'm sure it makes you feel like, whoa, what were we doing? But I know for Danny, he's a proud American. Jeff, I don't know. Okay, how do you get to that point? And you whoever wants to go first, how do you get to the point where you see this injustice done to people who are Japanese to the point where you're like, you're proud to be an American?
Well, I mean, I think at our age, there was still a little bit of name calling and whatnot, but you know, like with Jeff, it was judo. With me, it was I learned my humility through judo because I had an 80-year-old man throw me around like I was a paper clip, Sensei Kuniyuki, right? And so you learn that humility, but then at the same time, then you know, to take away your. I played football, and I played, you know, at it. I would block stuff off of my head and psych myself up, and I would take out my animosities on the opposing team. Seemed to work.
But you went from that, I'm guessing at some point, from blocking it out and taking your aggression out to being a proud American. Am I right?
Oh yeah.
We
always
have
have
that
been.
point.
Well, I mean, listen, after what their generation did, you know, particularly with the 442nd, these guys, you know, being the most decorated unit, you know, it's not going to be on us to disgrace us. You know what I mean? So that was the one thing I think I feared, and this is unfortunate. Jeff's probably the same. Jeff and I grew up the same way. We feared our dads.
Yeah.
Because they would, I mean, there's a line. You don't cross that line. If I cross that line, I paid dearly. You know? So I mean, so we knew that, you know.
Yeah, I think basically our fathers were the same. He says, you don't bring shame home to your family, you know. I remember a story my dad told me, and this always kind of brings a little tears to my eyes when he tells me this, when he told me this story. And when he was out of camp, he was still young, right? He was on a bus, and there was still a lot of animosity towards the Japanese. And so he would never look people in the eye. He would always, you know, just sit there and look down. And the bus came to a stop, and in comes a soldier, and he looked up. It's a Japanese soldier. You know, have all these medals, and my dad said, you know, I had to sit up a little straighter then, you know, because I felt proud that here's a Japanese guy who went to war for the U.S. and he's highly decorated, and it just made him feel good inside, you know, made him feel better than he did before.
Oh yeah.
So he always told me about the 442nd, and he says, that's the attitude you have to have. And
What was the
we
442nd for people who don't
Well,
know?
it was an all Japanese American regiment, you know, and actually they were most decorated, for size and strength. It was the most decorated unit. in US
Regimental
history.
combat team.
Yeah.
Were they code breakers to used as code breaker?
Well,
kind of stuff?
they
I mean,
did.
spoke
The
Japanese,
code breaker.
right?
Well, the code breaker side was called the MIS,
Yeah.
Military Intelligence Service. I had one uncle there. I think Craig's dad was in that too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Kanemoto was in that too. And so there's a group of them, and I think that was probably even just as dangerous, if not more, because they were out in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Flying over the Philippines with, hollowed out B-24s intercepting. In fact, it was one of their groups that intercepted the transmission about Yamamoto being in a cargo plane, and I think it was the next day they sent up a flight of fighters and they blew them out of the sky. Well, that was credited, really, that was to the MIS, but then, the rest of them went to Europe. The 447.
I think the large part of the 442 was people from Hawaii,
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of, yeah,
but they were all of Japanese ancestry.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I just came back from a show they had. It's called Defining Courage, and it's basically about the 100th Battalion, 442nd unit, and they're Japanese from the mainland, Japanese from Hawaii,
Yeah.
and they said they enlisted and they recruited these guys, and when they put them together, there was a lot of animosity between the mainland Japanese and
Right,
Hawaiians.
yeah.
Hawaiians called the mainland guys katonks, and
Yeah.
they got fist fights and everything. But when it came to go to war and they had to fight, all of a sudden they just gelled.
Oh yeah,
There's a few stories. There was a National Guard unit from Houston. What was his name? Bruyères or somewhere out there in France.
Oh, the Lost
The
Battalion?
Lost Battalion.
Texas Battalion, yeah.
They were trapped. They were goners. So the general sent this 442nd group in there. I don't know how many guys there were in there. I think there was like a couple hundred in that Lost Battalion. And I think they sent close to 1,000. I'm not sure the numbers, but close to 1,000. And they actually rescued these guys. I mean, it was a suicide mission almost. It was just crazy. They had no backup. And that's where that term, their motto was, go for broke. They said, we're going to go all out. If we die, we die.
Yeah.
Afterwards, the general that sent this group in there came to give these guys medals for what they did. And so they all lined up, and the general got mad and says, where's the rest of your unit? Damn it, you're all supposed to be here. And they looked at him and said, this is it. They lost more men than they rescued. They started with 1,000, they only came back with like 100.
There was
That's
pretty
basically
some,
a suicide mission.
yeah, yeah.
So, my dad tells me stories like that,
That's our respect.
That's your attitude you have to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys have also, all three of you, peeled off the Band-Aid of how inferior your father felt and how you felt for many years. And I'm learning, I've studied history in college, but I wasn't aware of that so much. And it makes me feel even sadder about that time period. But I thank you for peeling that Band-Aid away so we could learn and understand a little bit more about that. That story you told about your father, when the Japanese soldier came on, highly decorated, and then he could perk up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you were a little bit later in your life before you felt really good. And I, Danny and I and Jeff, and we look at you like you are an incredible human being. And I can't think of why you felt that way, because I look at you as a wonderful example, but it's interesting to learn that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and there were so many different perspectives too. Because I remember as a kid, I used to like watching war movies, and my dad would come by and say, hey, shut that off. Just say, shut that off. And there's things like I had one of my uncles did the beach landing at Anzio. It was a lot like Normandy.
Yeah.
The door dropped on the landing craft and a lot of guys got mowed down. Well, he went through that, and he was in the, I think it was the 526, the Armory Battalion, you know. And so he lost a lot of friends. And, you know, at the very end of the war, that unit, what was remaining out of that 526, one of the last missions they did was they were go out to go scout this one area. Well, they pulled up the Dachau. Now, can you imagine pulling up the Dachau behind barbed wire machine guns nests and machine gun nests, and the Germans had just vacated earlier that morning, and you pull up the Dachau, and you see all the death behind barbed wire. The Germans had just vacated, left, and you have family behind barbed wire back in the States. That messed them up. So we were told, don't you ever ask your uncle about the war, because it mentally got to them. You know, as a kid, I used to love watching war movies,
Yeah,
but
me
that
too.
it was a different perspective after hearing that, and I go, okay, I get it. You know.
Yeah. In that show, the Defining Courage, they talked about Dachau when they arrived there.
Yeah.
And he says that memory will never go away from those soldiers, seeing those bodies emaciated, piled up like, you know, cordwood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it right to take a break?
Yeah, we can.
we can finish. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. But a lot of us older guys, we have different callings. But I want to thank Yomi and Jeff for coming in. Jeff and I will talk more fishing. He's been my fishing partner for years on the American Angler. But Yomi, thank you so much.
Oh.
It was what you gave us today is it's golden. Absolutely, it's priceless.
Incredible.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful.